All right, should we get going? I imagine people will continue trickling in. Super. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. Taimur and I are really happy to be hosting this webinar and are really, really privileged to be joined by two experts in the B2B SaaS pricing world and revenue operations world. And I think have some really, really interesting things to share from their combined experiences across Brex, Carta, DocuSign, Zenefits, and others. So they don't need much introduction, but why doesn't everybody just kind of give a quick 1 to 2 line intro so everybody knows who's talking, and then we'll kick off and jump into some topics.
Awesome. I'm happy to go first. I'm Taimur. I'm one of the founders of Causal. Our product is a financial modeling and financial planning tool. Super excited to have Sam and Saad here today with us. They've kind of seen it all across a bunch of different companies. So excited for the discussion. Sam, maybe I'll hand over to you for a quick intro.
Awesome. Thanks, Taimur. Really excited to be here. My name's Sam Blond. I'm currently a partner at Founders Fund. Previously, I was CRO at Brex and VP of Sales at Zenefits. And as I mentioned in a post leading up to this conversation, 2 topics that I'm both opinionated and passionate about in pricing and RevOps. Saad, over to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Saad, and I lead pricing at Carta today. And I've been in pricing for the last 10 plus years. So been there, done it all, but I'm really passionate about pricing in terms of how this industry or this subject is evolving, and happy to talk to you about it today.
Thank you, Saad. And just to finish up, I'm Ria. I'm the CEO at Sequence. Sequence helps B2B companies to automate their quote to revenue process. We're focused on companies with hybrid pricing models and custom deal terms and a set of revenue infrastructure that works really well for those businesses. So with that, let's start talking about pricing. I guess as a starting point, Sam, maybe I'll pick on you first. Would just love for you to kind of look back at your time at Brex and Zenefits before that, and just kind of talk to me about some of the kind of pricing changes that kind of happened while you were there, how your pricing strategy evolved. I don't know if you can recall any experiments you ran and tested over the time you were there. Talk us through some of that.
Yeah. So I think pricing is one of those conversations that is somewhat business specific. And so there are lots of topics, and RevOps might actually be one of them, where there's sort of like consistent guidance that you can provide to startups broadly. And I think pricing, it can be relatively specific to a specific business or category or environment. That said, a couple things come to mind. At Zenefits, we were effectively free to the customer. We became the health insurance broker, and we made money on health insurance commissions. And so when we signed a new customer, rather than writing a check to use the Zenefits technology, the customer would make us their health insurance broker, and we would start receiving those health insurance commissions from the carriers like United and Cigna and Aetna. And that sounds great. And generally speaking, this concept of like a quasi-free product can be great, but there are some challenges. And one of those specific challenges is around controlling cycle times and creating urgency. And one of the things that we experienced at Zenefits very early was when we would talk to a customer in January, February, March, they would have what was called their open enrollment and renewal in Q4 of that year. And many of those customers would put off the conversation for many, many months until their health insurance renewal came due. And that was a real problem for us. And part of why it existed was this concept of free or lack of being able to use pricing to create urgency. One thing that we did was we created an implementation fee. That implementation at Zenefits was very involved. We had to work with the carriers, set up accounts, migrate over everybody's existing health insurance information. And the process took like 6 weeks, and we had a really large implementation organization that did this. And so there was a cost to Zenefits associated with implementation. We decided we would pass that on to the customer in the form of an implementation fee. and then use that to really drive behavior around creating urgency, waive the implementation fee, discount the implementation fee. And that really solved this problem that we had around creating urgency in the cycle. I'll try not to monopolize all of the time, but I'll quickly speak to Brex. One of the things that comes to mind with Brex around pricing that is sort of an overarching theme that has stuck with me is when we were launching specifically a bill pay product, which there is an existing market for today. There are lots of vendors that provide this concept of bill pay. And one of the things that we were considering was pricing this product sort of a volume-based, like how much the bill that somebody was paying, we would take a percentage of that. And somewhat obviously, that was met with some resistance in the marketplace because it was like, why am I paying you more to facilitate the payment of a bill that is more expensive than one that is less expensive? And I think the takeaway from that is pricing is one of these things where I don't recommend being innovative. Like innovating around pricing generally backfires. And if there is an established set of pricing rules that exist in your marketplace, whether it's usage-based or per user-based, just like kind of follow those guidelines loosely. I think what you don't want to have is unnecessary friction in acquiring customers and explaining how and why you price the product a certain way.
That's interesting that at Zenefits, some of the kind of the custom pricing terms were this kind of critical component to get deals over the line. We'll talk a bit more about that kind of further down. Saad, I'm interested to hear from you. As companies grow and scale, they obviously add new products and ancillary products, and lots of opportunities open up for how you can price and package, how you think about bundles, how you think about upsells. Tell us how you kind of thought through that at Carta, which
Sure,
I think now is very much a multi-product suite.
Absolutely. I think we have multi-product and we have multi-businesses also where we tend to grow. So when you think about like bundling, the first question when we tried this a while ago, we spent like a good 6 months on this exercise of saying that, all right, we have this set of customers. These are the products that we are working with. We do know like these products have some overlapping capabilities, which tend to increase the value that we deliver to our customers. So that was the hypothesis we started with and said, all right, maybe bundling them together would be a good idea. So based on this, what we did was we reached out to our customers and said, all right, if we bundle this product, what is the propensity to buy? And then we actually tested with our sales team and had them like do this small test with a subset of our customers who were we thought were more willing to buy this kind of a product from us. One thing that we quickly realized when we did that was that even though the buyer was the same, the user of the product was a little bit different. So bundling started to break in some cases where you had customers who would cherry pick their some features and say no to other features, and that's where you have the risk of them breaking the bundle and going into the territory of custom contracting and custom provisioning. That was one of the main learnings that we had. The next thing that we understood was like exactly like Sam said, one of the key principles that we use at Carta is simple, straightforward pricing. They should, like, if you can't explain your pricing within a single line to the customer, you're going to confuse your own sales team, which is how you think about it, like how confident they are when they're talking to the customer. And then, of course, if they're not confident, you're not going to have that with the customer. And especially, like, even if you get through the hurdle of new business deals, you're going to get into much more challenges if it is not straightforward, simple in upsell or even in renewals. When the customer is looking at the bill and it's like, hey, how did we get here? And if we can't explain that and walk them through the progression of how the pricing goes, I think that's the key element that we were looking at. So coming back to bundling and how we looked at it, we had different metrics of different products. So like something is sold as a transaction basis, something is sold as seat based. The first thing we did was once we understood what the packaging was, we aligned on the metric. And even though like value and value correlation to the metric was not too high in ancillary products, we as a company took the decision, said, all right, to make it simple and easy for our customers, we have to align on one metric so it's not confusing. And then we launched these bundles. We got really good success in terms of adoption around it, and we continue to do that going forward. And I think that's our way of approaching through bundles and use cases.
One of the interesting things is, you both sort of say keep pricing simple, and so maybe often the complexity isn't deriving the right pricing or packaging, but actually operationalizing it across the company. I'm really interested because, of course, pricing touches so many teams and obviously impacts so many downstream operations. How have you, where have those conversations sat in the organizations you've worked in, and how have you been kind of efficient and effective at operationalizing those pricing changes?
Maybe if I can quickly jump in before we move on to that. Yeah, a lot of the stuff that you guys mentioned really resonates, particularly the simplicity piece. I remember in the early days, we often felt like, it feels like we're leaving a lot of money on the table. We don't really scale very well with usage. Like, there's got to be a better way. We tried, various elaborate things around, okay, we'll do it based on number of calculations in Causal that you're doing. And what that just did was, kind of almost block off sales conversations where now we're having to have, multiple calls where they're like, okay, well, how many calculations might I use for this thing? And, ultimately we decided, we can figure out a way to crack the usage-based thing. So yeah, the simplicity piece, I think definitely resonates. And at the moment, we're kind of at this juncture where, we want to charge for a couple of extra things that you could do in the product, but we don't really have good ways to expose that to the user. At the moment, we don't really have automated ways to actually bill for that stuff. And so we're worried that it might just be really confusing. They'll just get invoiced for some random amount of money to 2 decimal places. They'll be like, wait, why am I being charged for this? We can't actually show that to the users. So yeah, I just wanted to share a couple of anecdotes around that stuff.
That's great.
Maybe I can add to it. I'll give you an example that we went through. So we had this really detailed model of pricing, and if you look at that Excel model, it will mess with your head. It had so many pricing sheets within it, and think about the customer experience at this point in time. In our minds, we're going right by the customer and saying, okay, if they want this, we'll charge this. If they don't want this, we can actually give some value back and we can be lower in our prices. The intention was right, but what was happening was with the customer, they were given this Excel form and it had 50, 60 data points that we wanted to capture from them. And then once that is input, you had a whole team discussing it and saying, okay, this is the scope of services we can offer. And then somehow magically we arrived at a number, which was what we would price it at. And we took that over and looked at it and said, all right, this makes no sense. The customer experience is we're getting so much feedback from the customers. I just I had a sales call with you, and now I have this Excel sheet that I have to fill out with this 50 different things you're asking me for. And what we did was we took that Excel sheet and we said, all right, scrap everything. We ask for one thing from the customer and that's it. And that will decide our pricing. And we've been doing it for last quarter and our customers thank us for it. I know it's anti-monetization of oh, I'm leaving money on the table, but at least what we've done is if we've sacrificed some monetization there, what we have done is we've increased our conversion rates and the deal cycle sizes. So the cycle times that you look at. So I think that's a much better experience for our customers, for our sales team. But yeah, we sacrificed some monetization there.
Well, I'm actually interested in kind of bringing up the usage-based pricing piece. There's obviously been a lot of talk about usage-based pricing. Taimur, you mentioned that you sort of tried it, experimented with it, and I think OpenView's recent pricing report sort of looked at the broader SaaS index and said companies adopting usage-based pricing outperformed their peers by a whopping 31% on revenue growth rates, with NRR being higher. Just interested to hear maybe from you, Sam, on what's your experience has been with usage-based pricing. Why do you think this is the case, and why is it such a hot topic right now?
My experience with usage-based pricing, and there are probably examples where you where you sort of have like a decision to make where it can be usage-based or license-based, platform-based, those sorts of things. Fintech is one where much of the pricing is usage-based. Brex certainly fell into that category where we made money on corporate card interchange, at least initially before we launched ancillary products. And when you make money, like I think the question was really like businesses are potentially growing faster when the product is usage-based pricing versus platform fee or something like that. And there were competitors that had what were basically prepaid cards and charge for usage of the software. So there were competitors that had sort of a more SaaS-like platform or licensing-based approach to this concept of expense management and corporate card bundled into one solution. We took the we're going to issue credit. It was 30-day credit and make money on effectively the charge volume. And so usage-based pricing. We were able to grow significantly faster in that model because the way that the user of our product sort of perceived the amount of money that the revenue that we were generating, it was not a line item on their budget. They took out a corporate card with Brex and they actually made money from that corporate card in the form of a rebate. And if you compare that to a competitor that had a bundled prepaid card product and enterprise software application that they charged the customer for, that then becomes a different decision within the business. And you can't charge nearly as much money direct to the customer where you have to get budget and convince somebody to write you a check than you can in this usage-based model where Brex is effectively making money from the merchants where the card is being used. So I know that's not a perfect example for everyone, but it's a fintech example that comes to mind in this category of usage-based versus platform or license-based.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, I think we've seen some really interesting examples of sort of SaaS companies deploying it as well to obviously, align more with kind of their users' perception of value, and also just kind of works really well with a PLG motion sometimes to kind of allow users to get going, pay as you go really quickly. I think earlier we were talking about the sort of Zoom example during the pandemic, sort of demand 30x, and their sort of PLG motion combined with a consumption-based pricing model really enabled them to very quickly kind of capitalize on the growth in usage that kind of happened over that time.
Yeah, I'm super jealous of all these like database companies and stuff like that, where usage based is just the norm. Everyone expects it. There's no conversation around it, and it just grows. Whereas, I think Sam, what you said feels totally right. That like if that's how people do it in your industry, great. You probably can't push the boat out too much.
Yeah, I think it goes back to this concept of like don't innovate in pricing, and also talk to your potential customers. You'll get feedback, not necessarily on the price point, which I think we might talk about, but you will get feedback on the pricing model. How do you want to buy and pay for this product?
And we've obviously talked a bit about kind of new pricing models and sort of I guess what sort of companies trying to sort of deploy hybrid pricing models. We've also seen a lot of companies recently deploying hybrid sales motions, or hybrid go-to-market motions. So kind of a mix of PLG and SLG. How do you think these two motions work together? Are there instances where they don't work well together? Would love to kind of draw on some of your experiences there.
I'm happy to start. So for me, this has always been a bit of a price. There's a correlation with price point, and whether the acquisition motion can support a sales team or not. And one, so like that's maybe point one. And I think that exists both with the product that you are selling, and then also who you are selling it to. And to use Brex as an example, we segmented our business based off of effectively the amount of revenue that a customer could generate. For many businesses, that's going to be based off of the number of employees that they have. And if you were below a certain size, we couldn't support having a sales rep providing a one-to-one demo-based sales experience. And so we had to design a self-serve, product-led acquisition strategy, it's very buzzwordy, for this segment of the market, in part, well, two things. In part because the revenue that those customers were generating couldn't support the dedicated sales headcount. And also, like, that customer actually didn't really want a salesperson. And so one way of potentially thinking about this or approaching this product is if you put yourself in the shoes of your customer, a bit in the abstract, and you think as a potential buyer, how would you want to purchase a product like this? Do you want to have a one-to-one conversation with, like, many people actually want to be sold to? I'll use an extreme example. If you are purchasing Workday, which is a very enterprise HR application, it's exceptionally nuanced. There's like very complex implementation. It's expensive. You don't want to go onto Workday and, like, click something to add to the cart and check out. And you can use that example, in the other end of the spectrum as well. And just sort of like both with your product type and then also the segment that you are selling into, use that barometer of, like, how would I want to buy this product? And that might be helpful in guiding towards the strategy there.
Well, just picking up on the Workday example, Workday now has a huge range of products, some of which kind of involve complex implementation, and actually some of which are pretty simple to access. Should Workday, open up a PLG motion for a simpler product that it has as a kind of land and expand, and sales teams then have access to this kind of big new lead pool, or do you think it attracts the wrong kind of customer base?
Well, I'm as familiar with Workday enough to be dangerous. So I think Workday as a specific example is probably one where they're not going to get, unlike, let's say, hopefully examples that people are familiar with, something like a Twilio that can have really large enterprise deployments of their product, but it's quite easy for a developer to come in and sort of just like test a little bit with the application. I don't think Workday falls into that category. I do have experience with a company where we really benefited from what you're describing, Ria, at EchoSign. We had United Healthcare, Oracle, really large Fortune 500, 7-figure contracts with the product. We also had, and EchoSign was electronic signature. We also had just online the ability for anyone in the world to come test sending of documents and getting them signed. And we felt that was a really valuable experience because it was low friction. You didn't need a lot of training and onboarding to use that product. And the like aha moment was nearly immediate and very valuable. And again, I think Twilio is probably in a category that's similar. And so those are examples where, even if you have 7-figure enterprise customers, having access to like a very lightweight freemium or PLG type product, it can be really valuable.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. It would be great to move on to maybe more of the RevOps side of things. I'm curious, we've talked a lot about pricing, and obviously, sales is a big part of that, and the sales team, they're actually doing the selling. but finance also plays a big role there as well. And so I'd love to hear from you guys, Sam and Saad, just around how, in your experience, sales works with finance. Which team typically owns pricing? How quantitative are you building out loads of models and scenarios to figure out what pricing strategy to use? Is it more sort of qualitative, just on what you're hearing out there? Would love to understand what that collaboration looks like. Saad, maybe if you don't mind going first on this one.
Sure. So I think I joke around every time is like getting to the right answer for us is 20% of the work. 80% of the work is making internal stakeholders come with us to actually go and execute on it. So you hit on the right finance, sales, product, enablement, delivery. They're all like the key cross-functional partners that we have to work with. So in terms of our methodology of how we start with it, it's also qualitative and quantitative both. So we're looking at customer feedback, we're getting sales feedback, we're looking at our NPS scores and understanding what is happening there. We have our churn reasons and trying to figure out where we're losing deals, why we're losing those deals. So those are all, if you think about it, kind of inputs into developing our hypothesis. Then you're going out, testing out with customers, you're doing research, you're doing surveys, all that stuff, and you're getting that information. As you're working through cross-functional partnership, and you talked about modeling and all, I just made one last evening for our finance team to help us understand if we change our pricing, what's the impact on win rate. It is really, really important to bring those cross-functional teams along with as you're going through that process, you want your key cross-functional partners to understand and go through that process with you. And it makes it I'm doing it selfishly. I'm not doing it for the good of everyone. It's the selfish reason is that then it eases out into as you're thinking about recommendation execution, you have a team that is already bought in what you've learned through that cycle. So the way we usually do it is, as we find a piece of data and we think the insights are important, we share those. We have them sit through our customer interviews as well, where we're actually talking to the customer, having them learn and listen in and see. Because if you think about, sales has plenty of customer interaction, they do it all day. But if you have these other functions, finance for instance, they're a little bit removed from that whole feedback. So when we include them in it, they're aha moments for them, and trying to understand what has happened and what we did and why we would do it. So I think going through that process is one. The other piece which I would really highlight is, I've seen this play out on different stages, having your exec team buy into your pricing recommendations early on in the process is going to help you quite a bit. So again, like I said, 80% of the work is execution. Exec team buy-in really trickles down throughout your stakeholders, and you can quickly come to market and execute on it. And I think that's where working with finance is really important, modeling it out. And my CMO said it once. He said, any model you bring to me will not be the perfect model. It won't be accurate. And we understand that models are there to help us predict it, but usually in reality, it tends to deviate from those. But it's really good to do that work so that you can as soon as you see, because that's something that gives you a benchmark to monitor against. And as soon as you see things deviating, you can make those shifts. So I think that's how typically I go through that process.
Awesome. So it sounds like sales kind of drives the process, but kind of making sure you're bringing the other teams along. I love the idea of having the finance folks actually sit in on some of those customer conversations, because I think, just from our experience working with various finance teams, I think finance is often many steps removed from actually, what's going on sort of in the arena with customers, what they care about, and so on. Sam, how has it been for you at the various companies you've been at?
Yeah, I'll add a little bit of my personal experience color to this, which is this is an evolution within a business in a couple ways. The first is the folks that are involved in this decision change over time. Saad is the director of pricing strategy at Carta. A 10-person tech startup does not have a director of pricing strategy. And so, this concept of determining pricing, the players involved, it evolves over time. I think there's also this evolution of what I would describe as a bit of an art to more of a science. And in the early days, It might just be the founders that are determining the initial price point because they're doing founder-led sales. And a lot of that is this like, my best guess given what exists in the marketplace. I would say the things that I look for relatively early on is you actually want a little bit of friction with pricing. If pricing is never a blocker to acquiring customers, and you never have to discount, or it likely means your price point is too low. And so I actually like a little bit of tension around the pricing conversation. And the way that you get there is you start with what you believe is the best price point to acquire customers. And I think, founder-led sales, no brand early on, you may err on the lower side because, again, you don't want that to be a blocker. As the business becomes more established, your product offering improves, you're winning more customers, and the shift from logo acquisition and getting customers on the platform, as that starts to evolve to revenue targets. That's, I think, when you want to revisit pricing and determine, like, are we getting a little bit of tension here? And is this the fair market value for the product that we're offering? And so oftentimes, and I've experienced this, multiple companies come to mind that I work closely with, where like there have been several price increases over time as the product quality increases and the like value that product is delivering continues to increase. And then maybe more tactically, as the business gets larger, the way that it worked at Brex when we would launch new products is finance really started. Finance started with putting together, maybe it was a memo, like there's probably lots of work that went into just like, here is the marketplace that exists for a product like this. Here are the different price points, here are the different features, here are the features that we have, and ultimately arrived at an initial pricing recommendation. And then we, as a leadership team, got together and just provided feedback on what we thought of that pricing. This is a slight tangent, but I'll go with it. One of the things that's a little counterintuitive that I've always felt about pricing is I actually want to be I want to be a high-priced product. And I want to be perceived as a high-priced product. And that's, again, contrarian coming from a sales leader that's trying to sell the product. You would think like, it'd be easier to sell a product that isn't very expensive. There are a couple of reasons why. The first is I want the buyer to perceive my product as the premium solution in the space. And oftentimes people associate quality with cost. Now, like, you actually have to have arguably the best product in the space. But again, I want people to believe that they're on the phone with the premium provider in the marketplace, and that's reinforced with a higher price point. And then the second thing is I do like to leverage discounting. And so much of selling is psychological. And so if I can be the premium, perceived as the premium product in the market, and I can deliver this perception of somebody getting a really great deal on the premium product in the market, those are the outcomes that I'm looking to drive towards when determining price points.
Nice. I love that. Yeah, we've definitely found that as we've kind of, increased prices in year one of going to markets, I think the level of seriousness with which customers approach those conversations also kind of radically changed, where, when we were just trying to close our first sort of, 1 to 5 customers, we just wanted to get people on board no matter what. We didn't want price to be a blocker. And then I think basically from kind of customers 5 to maybe 20 or 25, each time we close a new customer, we'd kind of increase the price a little bit. And we, obviously we'd be a bit scared about, we started off at maybe like $300 a month, which at the time was like, oh my God, this is crazy. But then, when the first time we quoted like 1,000 a month or 2,000 a month, and eventually like 3,000 a month, every time it feels really painful. It's like, no way is this going to work. But as the product grows and you can do more things, you do actually end up providing more value there. Maybe as a final question
Can I ask one question to Sam? I think there's probably a bunch of kind of startup, scale up founders in the room, and probably experiencing that, as you said, Taimur, that thing that happens where your ACV sort of start edging up, and then all of a sudden you're in the arena with some, fairly, I guess, enterprise-esque clients, and need to figure out how to kind of jump your pricing up to kind of match their needs, even if it's sort of extending beyond where you can deliver today. And this is an interesting question. Like, do you go in and just kind of price next to incumbents, well-established incumbents who are kind of much more comfortable for these enterprise customers? Obviously, you don't want to price too low because it signals you don't know how to deliver the product or the service, or you don't know the worth of it. But at the same time, these more established companies or these scaled companies are making a kind of risk-adjusted bet. If they're going to go with you, there's probably got to be some pricing concession there. Maybe talk us through how you think through that, because I imagine a lot of companies here are listening in today are probably kind of experiencing some of that.
This is one where I think there's a lot of sort of very specific nuance to the environment that the company is selling into. And it's one of those things that might be hard, at least for me, and Saad may have a more thoughtful or articulate answer for this, but it's hard for me to give sort of broad advice on this thing. And I'll give a couple specific examples as to what I mean by that. And so if you are competing in a space that is really well established, let's take CRM as an example, and you have a new CRM product, and maybe it's like a vertical CRM product, and the incumbent is someone like Salesforce, and Salesforce is like really expensive. That's one where it's going to be hard to be priced higher than Salesforce and go win those deals. Versus if you are either creating a new category, or if the category that you're playing in has vendors that are like you're competing against other startups. That's an example where it actually is easier to sort of like stake a pole that like we are the premium provider in the space, and reinforce that with price point. Yes, so that's what comes to mind, but not a perfect answer.
Let me add here, like one thing, like you think about advice to founders and stuff. I'll give you an example. We're selling this product for a year, and I'm going to make up numbers. So let's say our most premium tier of that offering was $15,000, and we looked at him like we think that we should be able to charge more than that. And we started with the price test, and within a week we sold like deals twice or thrice that size. So all of a sudden, like this whole thing that we had for a year, that okay, nobody's going to pay us more than $15,000, and then all of a sudden you see like within a week they're like deals twice or thrice that size, and you're monetizing much more better there. So I think first is to break those mental models and really test out those pricing. The second piece to it is really important, is that your packaging or your product strategy has to go along with the pricing. So not every, like we are thinking like, oh, we should be premium in the market, but your market has SMB, mid-market, enterprise customers, and you have to deliver to each one. Not everybody is there to buy a Mercedes or a really luxury or premium offering from you. Some are like more price sensitive, and then your offering can tackle those use cases for you. So that's one way of looking at it. The other piece to it is that when thinking about like when you're going to go for a premium offering, or you're going to say that, okay, I'm much better, that's why I'm going to charge higher. One thing that we always see is like the execution of it. And like Sam mentioned, like it is psychological when you're talking to those customers. What we really do, and where we've seen more success, is that the sales rep who are more focused on the differentiators and talk about like how we add more value than competition, tend to break away from that conversation altogether. So that, as you can say, like, oh, here's a peer charging me something, and when you break it from there and you say, all right, we have this more differentiated value, or our use case different, or where we add more value, I think that's where we've seen them do better. And speaking of list price and discounts, it's funny, like majority of the reps that we see that outperform the rest of the reps, they tend to stick with list prices, and they offer very little discounting, and it is like at the very end, and they do discounting based on like their principle in terms of, why should I discount? You're going to buy more, I'll discount more. It's not like you asked for it and I'll give you a discount. It's like you buy more, your size is increasing, or maybe it's the end of the month and I want this deal to go in this quarter or something. That's where they discount. So they're very intentional about where they're discounting and how they're discounting.
Nice, makes a ton of sense. We've got a couple of minutes left, so final question for you guys. Knowing what you know now, about B2B sales, about pricing, what would you have done differently in your previous roles? And are there any kind of contrarian or sort of hot takes that you have when it comes to pricing and RevOps? Sam, if you want to go first.
Sure. Well, I gave, lots of mistakes. But let's start with the contrary. We could be here for hours. I'll start with the contrarian insights, and then Saad, maybe you go, and if we want to get to mistakes, happy to go there. So and maybe I'll throw in one mistake. Okay. Contrarian insights. I gave one, which is I actually want to be a high-priced product and perceived as a high-priced product, especially from a salesperson. I think you'll get pushback from most salespeople that like, this is too expensive for us to sell. And I think that's the wrong, oftentimes the wrong pushback. The other contrarian insight that I have, is it sort of relates to sales, is this concept of more salespeople does not equal more sales. And I oftentimes see companies sort of spreadsheeting out ways to hit revenue targets, and they just plug in like, we're going to have this many AEs, and if we've got this much revenue per AE backward looking, it's going to be this much revenue per AE forward looking. And oftentimes the opposite occurs. This is a mistake that I made. And what happens is, when you add new salespeople, if you don't have the demand to support them, you are spreading the demand that you do have across more people that are less experienced. And so conversion rates will actually drop on the existing demand that you do have when you put more people into the environment. And so in many instances, adding more salespeople actually leads to less sales. So that's definitely one mistake that I made. And then I would say one thing that I learned over time, made the mistake at Zenefits, got it right at Brex, just the appreciation and heavy investment in revenue operations. I had, for reasons that will take too long to explain, a bit of like a negative allergic reaction to revenue operations from an experience that I had very early in my career. And so at Zenefits, I was resistant to investing in and appreciating RevOps. And today, as I sit here, both from Zenefits and Brex, like I attribute so much of my personal success and the success of those sales organizations to really strong revenue operations counterparts and a really heavy investment in RevOps as a category. And I would say I've never come across an environment where I've said to the company or the founder, like, you're investing too much in RevOps. So that's a mistake that I've made.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Saad, from you, knowing what you know today, what would you have done differently in your previous role, and any hot takes about revenue operations?
Yeah, definitely. I think like one thing that if I were to like, I'd seen myself evolve as I've gone through this cycle. One thing that we have to really make sure is that go the extra mile and own the complete process end to end. So when you're thinking about pricing, you're like, okay, you're doing your Excel sheets, you're doing your modeling, you're doing all that stuff. That's great and fine. But go the extra mile, work with your sales team, work with your enablement teams, listen to their calls, and sit down with customers and actually like really see how pricing is presented, communicated. That's where like that whole idea of like, oh, making it more simple versus monetizing better, that it came from, is like when you own that entire chain, you get to see the execution of it and realization of it. I think for myself, it really had a lot of impact on how I think about pricing going forward. I know like initially we've designed or thought through like monetization is the key, and that's where you need to focus on. But as you own more of that chain, as you see more of those processes, you get to learn a lot more. So I think that's one thing where I continuously try to improve on going forward.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. I love the sort of kind of having a holistic understanding of how pricing actually works in the field, rather than just having your spreadsheet or your strategy doc or whatever it might be. I think that's a great note for us to end on. Sam, Saad, thank you so much for joining us. This has been awesome. Thanks for everyone who tuned in. We are recording this as well, and so you'll all receive a recording in your inboxes too. Maybe to wrap up, we can just kind of go through each of us and say where people can find us online if they're interested in following along. So Sam, if you can go first.
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter. I guess LinkedIn, just find Sam Blond at Founders Fund, and Twitter at Sam D Blond.
Awesome. From my side, check out causal.app, and I'm on Twitter as well if you just search for my name. Saad, best networks to reach you on.
I'll be on LinkedIn. I don't think I've used Twitter that much. I'm sorry.
No worries. Probably good decision. And Ria, finally.
Great. We're at sequencehq.com. Also on LinkedIn and Twitter. You can find me personally or the company. And Saad and Sam, thank you both. This has been awesome, and I think we could have kept going for longer.
Amazing. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. All the best. Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.